sometimes when I allow myself to and feel like facing off with my subconscious, I question, no surprise, I question what I'm doing with these videos. And I've been writing a bunch lately. And, a lot of my time is consumed on this type of topic, right? The philosophy, the psychology, the science, if you will, but trying to understand how we think and the behaviors we exhibit and all that stuff, right? How it all works. When I question that, though, I wonder, like, what am I bringing to this, right? What's the purpose? What's the objective? What am I actually gonna bring that's different, insightful, valuable, that somebody else hasn't already thought of, that isn't already out there? Because these types of videos, and if I had to lump it into something, right, but probably maybe against my best wishes, I'd probably lump it as philosophy, but it's somewhat self-help, right? It's how do you improve yourself? How do you change for the better? A lot of it, that's the root of it, to some extent. There's tons of that out there. There's so much, whether it be books or podcasts or YouTube videos or just social media accounts that are sharing this type of information. There's so much out there. And a lot of it, no surprise, right? Because if you're trying to communicate something to somebody, if you're trying to convince somebody of something, typically the most effective way to do that is to make a cohesive kind of narrative, which is what our minds look for, right? Create the story, craft the story around it, identify kind of the key pillars, the key themes that you find, and communicate that you think are going to be most impactful. And that makes a lot of logical sense to approach it that way. And that's what you see a lot of. So I just listened to a podcast today, and somebody that wrote a book around trying to kind of know yourself better and improve yourself. And there was a list of principles of like the key attributes and the key traits and the key things you need to do, right? To kind of go through that. There's some books out there that are very focused on building habits, for example, and what are the actions you could take to kind of overcome that maybe perceived laziness in your mind. There's other books that are much more somewhat spiritual and trying to understand kind of the laws of the universe and how that all plays together. There's all different books, right, that are geared towards all different things. And so you have that, right? And I'm asking myself this question of what am I bringing to that? Do I really think I'm better or different than what's already out there when there's so much out there? Particularly when a lot of the realizations or the insights that I come up with and even talk about in these videos, I hear them said differently, framed differently, different metaphors, different parallels, but they're out there. So, what am I doing in the grand scheme of this? I also find myself questioning, though, at the same time, there's so much out there, but seemingly so many people are still struggling with this, right? It's out there because people want it. There's such a demand for it. But it makes me think of Michael J. Fox quote, actually, right? He's famous for having many things, but Parkinson's, and he created a foundation, and he said, I'm creating this foundation with the whole intent of it being closed down in 10 years or whatever it was, right? I want to be out of business, because out of business means we solved the problem. Well, in theory, these self-help concepts, podcasts, all these books, it should be the same. We shouldn't see the demand increasing. We shouldn't see more things coming out. We should see people consuming what's out there, and assuming it's effective, we see them improving, and they no longer need it. They now have the tools. They have the things they need to do. So those things don't add up, right? It doesn't reconcile. What's going on there? And I don't think it's because the content that's being put out is bad, right? Some of it is, but some of it's great. I don't think it's because it's not thoughtful or not logical. A lot of it is. I don't think that it's people being malicious or just out for a buck. Again, some of it, but there's so much of it out there that a lot of it has to be good and useful. So what's missing, right? What's going on here? Why don't we see this business shutting down? Why is this industry still thriving and in many ways growing? My hypothesis is, and this gets back to the original question, what am I bringing to this? What I find myself thinking more and more is the mistake, if you will, that so many are making in trying to communicate this information of how to improve yourself, is that it's so, for lack of a better phrase, rules-based. Whatever your take is, whatever your point of view is, your perspective, the people that do it well try and analyze and understand how our minds work, how we think, what are the things that drive and dictate our behaviors, and they try and attack that. And they try and, again, look for those themes and say, okay, this happens or that happens, and this is how you handle fear in this situation, and this is how you handle laziness in this situation. And they're giving, which they have to give, some form of generic advice because they want it to apply to as many people as possible. And in many cases, they believe it does. And to some extent, it does. But my realization is I don't think this thing is rules-based. Sure, there are certain rules, right? We all come from, or cut from the same cloth, if you will, and that we're the same species. So I'm sure there's some aspects of how we think and function that are similar and do cut across, by and large, all humans. So there are certain things you could do. But I would argue the vast majority of what makes us who we are, what makes us tick, what makes us act out the way we do and develop the views and the beliefs that we do and the decisions we make is custom to us, right? It's based on our DNA, our wiring, our lived experience, our perception of that lived experience. So even if you're a sibling in the same house, given that your age is different and you viewed it different and you looked at it from this angle and the other person from that angle, it's going to be totally different. So to assume there's a rules-based way to handle this and say, well, you just apply these rules and then you'll get better. It sounds nice. It's what we want. It makes it easier. It makes it simpler. It makes books sell. But I don't think it's right. I think the people that really do it best understand that I can only give you so many general tips, but we have to figure it out specifically for you, almost more like a psychologist would do, right? Where it's more one-to-one and you're trying to figure it out and you see more impact through that. So what I think I'm trying to do, right? Back to the question, what am I fucking doing here? Where's this all going? I think that's the angle I want to go after. I understand it's not the sexy, easy commercial angle to go after, but I think it's the right one. And it's trying to take that level of customization to give people, right? Teach people how to fish rather than give them fish. I want to teach them how to figure out that custom solution for themselves. I want to show them through the approach of saying, let's understand how your mind functions. Not specifically what your drivers are and what those are. You have to figure that out doing the hard work. But let's figure out at a generic level what we can, which is how our minds function. What's the source code underneath it, right? And try and make that as custom as possible. Don't know how you do that yet at scale, right? Maybe there's a way, that's what I'm working through. But I think that's at least a hypothesis on the answer to the question I posed in the beginning.